Derek Nelson attending today?
I haven't heard from him.
Okay.
You're good.
So we're on.
It's 4 o'clock. We'll call the Tree Advisory Commission meeting to order. And we'll call the roll from my left. So Joe, please.
Joe Stadheim, City Engineer.
Greg Dearson, Tree Commissioner.
Tom Romaine, Commissioner.
Paul Egeland, Tree Commission.
Tony Guggesberg, Advisor.
Joey Schugel, Park and Rec Director.
Jeff Huffman, Public Works Superintendent.
Danita Trevish, Park and Rec Administrator.
And then Jordy Veit is going to join us as a guest from the audience today. We'll look for approval of the agenda.
I would offer a motion of approving the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, the agenda passes. Then I'll look for approval of last minutes.
So,
I would offer a motion to approve the minutes of the July meeting minutes.
Okay.
and I'll second that.
Seeing motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. The minutes are approved. To our old business, agenda item 5.1, the 2023 city reimbursement programs and budget update. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Within your packet is was last week's up-to-date reimbursement spreadsheet. You can see with that spreadsheet, we had $77 left. We have received the $3,000 remaining from that DNR grant, and we have a pending reimbursement amount of almost $900. So those funds will be moving quickly, I anticipate. So if anyone has reimbursements that they're waiting to submit, I would get them in before our funds are depleted for the year.
If they are waiting, say November, December, it would just carry to our budget update then?
Right. Yep. Yeah, I would anticipate by our next meeting that will probably be depleted, but I guess we'll see what happens in the next couple months.
Okay. Any other questions?
Who's the lucky person that gets the last 77
I'm not
20.
the first one on the list, but
that's left in the budget?
well, yeah. Now we have that 3,077.
Okay,
so
that's
yeah.
that's good.
If there are no other questions for 5.1, we'll look to 5.2. I don't see Derek Nelson, so we'll go to 5.3. Joy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Some of my Park and Rec updates are later on the agenda here, but one thing I did want to touch on is we continue to be very dry, as all of you know, with weather. So we are continuing to have a lot of our new plantings in park areas have water bags and continued watering throughout this fall season. Hopefully we can get some rain coming up here too, as some more moisture before we head into winter. We have lost some trees throughout the summer. However, for our inventory right now, we're looking pretty good on those new trees and continuing to identify areas for additions as they come.
And we'll see the EAB and parks. We'll discuss that down on the agenda yet. Any 5.4, any public works update for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Council. We lost one tree downtown and that we took out, and it's gonna be replaced this fall. So that's where we sit on that. The next couple of weeks, we're gonna be cutting tree stumps. We're gonna start. We got 65 on the list. There's 50 that are down right now that are ready to go. So we start cutting boulevard stumps next week, and we're busy mowing stormwater ponds right now. So that's all I got to report.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, we'll take 5.5, private tree services update. Tony Gugasberg is here today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess, yeah, just a couple questions. I get a lot of calls, obviously, because I'm in this business of trees, on the ash borer, mostly, you know, if they should save their tree or not. But I guess the question is, and maybe it's going to be brought up here or not, the ash trees on the boulevard yet, if they got an ash tree that's going to die or is dying, who's going to take it down? You know, is that something the city is going to do yet? What should they do? And then the other question I have is over the last several years here, trees have been planted back on the boulevard, and some of them have died, and they're gone. So they were just wondering if they're going to get replaced or not in the areas where there were some dead trees. So I don't know if anybody can answer those two questions.
Mr. Chair, I can handle that. So as far as boulevard trees right now, we don't have any funds currently, but we'll be touching in the next item our grant application that we hope, if we're successful, that would take care of the remaining boulevard trees throughout the city. But as of this moment in time, we don't have any plans other than applying for the grant, hoping we get the grant funds to remove the remaining boulevard ash trees. If it's in the condition that the property owner wants to take it now, we do have funds available for reimbursement on a first come, first served basis. And then as far as new plantings that have died, it would depend on what project it was on and if it's still under warranty or not. So that'd be more specific per address depending on when that was planted and whatnot. So
Sure. I know a few of them were planted last year, and I just had somebody ask, I wonder if they're going to come replace those, and I said, I have no idea. I just said, talk to the city on those.
Yeah, you can direct them to us. That
Sure.
works. So.
Any other questions for us, Tony?
Not at this
Or
time.
for Tony? Okay. Thank you. That does, hopefully we address that with 5.6 here and that application. So either Joe, I suppose it falls to Joe or Joey to the grant update and that proposal.
Joe, why don't you start with the grant update
Okay,
and then I'll
yeah,
jump in.
Mr. Chairman and Commission members, so at the council meeting on Tuesday, the council authorized the application for that DNR Relief Program grant. John Nisley has got a draft of that grant ready to go, so we will work as staff on finalizing that, compiling our letters of support, and we will get that application in prior to the deadline, which I believe is end of the month, I think.
Mid-September, September 18th rings a bell.
So that's the update for that. So we'll submit that and cross our fingers.
Right, and timeline for that, Mr. Commissioner and Commissioners, I believe is they review applications starting in October, and it's a 4 to 6 week process, and I think communities find out pretty quickly. So this is not the 7 county metro area. This is greater Minnesota, and we feel we have a pretty strong application going forward, so hoping things work. And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is step 1. There are 2 different grant proposals. This is the first step. We will be going for another grant application as well.
Question. What's the breakdown on this grant between boulevard trees or parks trees? Is there?
This initial grant application is going to be all boulevard. We're going to concentrate on wiping out all the boulevard trees,
Okay.
or ash trees, I should say, not all the boulevard trees. But yeah, we want to concentrate on the boulevard areas first, and then parks after that.
Okay.
Right.
I was just curious. That's all. Thank you.
Right.
Yep.
And Commissioner Romaine, there is a stipulation in this one for treating trees. So in this application as well as we're treating 11 park trees as part of this application as well. And I can jump into the EAB update.
Yep.
So at two different work sessions in August, one being the tree commission work session and one being the city council work session, was the EAB in our parks proposal was presented, and that really laid out an inventory of our ash trees in 11 different parks that we are seeing the effects of EAB. And what we really started this in anticipation of this grant program to identify our inventory condition, and really met with three different things: location, size, and location, size, and I should pull up my someone help me out if they have that there.
Condition.
Thank you. Location, size, and condition. So kind of identifying those three criteria as we're looking at that. And really when it was pretty evident as we started that process in the locations in the parks where those ash trees are, really trying to identify how much value that brings to those park users. Are we spending time in those areas? And from there then looked at the size of the tree, and then the condition was really the factors. And on the surface, 11 trees out of those 160 plus trees there seems very small, but really a lot of those trees are boulevard trees on the exteriors of parks. There is good diversification nearby already. We've, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've been working hard on replenishing the inventory in anticipation of having to do this someday. And the great thing about if we are successful on these two different grant cycles is one-for-one replacements on there. You will notice that some of the trees as well would be recommended to leave and let, are in currently good condition. However, the size isn't really conducive to treatment, but they're in areas where we see value in those parks, and park users see value. For instance, around the splash pad at North Park is one of those areas.
Any questions for Joey? The 11 that were treatable were split into two different locations, correct? In
Yes, so
North Park and North German Park?
yes, Chair Dearson, North Park and German Park, some of those German Park, those 5 trees in German Park are already currently being treated. So that would be a continuation of those. Those are near the amphitheater area, providing additional shade there for concert goers and park users.
And we discussed at the work session in Nails Park, there's quite a few replants or ready replacements, maybe we could say, alongside or near some of those larger ashes that we've anticipated
There really are.
having problems.
Yes, yep, that initial area just coming into Nels Park is very heavy ash, and they're in tough shape right now. So in anticipation of that, we've added 2 rows of trees and some other interior trees, and would continue to focus on the interior areas of the parks that we're looking to do those replacements. We have a little leeway from where a tree would come down on how close to place it with a replacement.
Was there, with the Relief Community Forest Grant application, did they have stipulation this time on varieties for replanting? I know that was part of the DNR descriptor last time.
I believe they do. I guess I haven't looked at it that fully. Mr. Nisley has been the leader on that grant writing process. I can pull it up, but it'd take me a second here.
We ran into that last time with some of the options that homeowners had for their boulevard, is there were, I think, 6 to choose from, maybe something like that. And maple was not on there, so I know we had heard from that. And I just wondered if that was still in there in
Right.
that language.
Yeah, if I'm recalling right, Commissioner Dearson, commissioners, I believe it's the DNR approved list. You know, with you have some options there. I believe it was 6 to 8 different species,
I
but
believe that's correct, yep.
we can prepare that list for you and send that out.
I think that, again, with that grant, if that gets approved, I think the sooner we get that information out, the better. Because we already have, the boulevards already have some limitations on what we should or shouldn't plant on them. And that might, not that we're going to run into this again, but
Yeah, I think people have finally figured out, you know, at least when I've talked to them, it's like if they're going to replace trees in their yard or on the boulevard, it's like, okay, we'll have one of this and one of this, you know, not 5 maples because they really look nice in fall. So, but I mean, if people want one, I'm not going to say, no, don't plant a maple. But with all the maples in town, there's probably, now that the ash are going, I'm going to say, just from a walking survey, 45 to 50% of the trees are maples in this town. So. But we are limited on trees that are going to provide nice shade trees, and obviously everybody wants one that's going to grow fast. So that's not always the best scenario, because the faster they grow, most likely they're going to be storm damage or break, and or not last as long. So we're trying to educate the people, and I think we're doing a good job of it.
any more, Joy?
No, we'll look to bring a list to you next time.
But I think the parks inventory has a pretty good variety in them as well. So I think as we get used to seeing that. I do appreciate the all boulevard, or that push to the boulevard ones first. And I think we've tried to tackle as many as we can, but there's, when you say 2,400 trees in town, it's quite a number. So, any other questions, commissioners, on 5.6? Then we'll move to 5.7. We'll invite Jordy Veit.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Jordy Veit, 1400 North Garden Street in town here. Just to give you an update on the Cover It Up program, and I apologize that you did not have anything in your agenda packet. I was just actually earlier this week, got all the pictures and everything finalized and everything put together, since I was trying to avoid the hottest of the worst of the heat when I was out there doing this. But if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of go through some things. Same thing as we've done in the past several years, collecting data. We're describing the understory, taking photos. The photos looking down at each plot, and then we do the fisheye looking at eye level from the center of the plot, and then also from the perspectives of where we have the test flags for the buckthorn. The fisheye photos are primarily used for them to estimate the amount of light reaching that area of those plots. And then looking at our buckthorn test seedlings, and then submit data, which I have already completed as well. So I'll skip over this, but in case you're interested, this is just the density classes and how we estimate the density of the different things. So this one here, there's quite a bit on here. Two easy things I'll point out: the number of ferns and number of conifers has not changed. Actually has not changed since the start of it in our plots. The amount of bare ground has decreased. In most cases, square 6, it actually increased along with square 2, but otherwise, overall, the amount of bare ground has decreased. Overall, the plot has more vegetation. Sedges and grasses have stayed similar. I'll make a comparison to the start of the project here in a minute or so. And then broadleaf plants have stayed steady compared to last year as well. So those are just some general comments compared to last year. Looking at growth All of our test buckthorn has increased in size, but that would be to be expected. Nothing probably overly huge as far as increases. The interesting thing is I have several plots. So 1B, 3A, those two are two of the plots that have the native seed mix. And I have actually lost buckthorn in those. So I had more buckthorn in there last year, and that has actually decreased. Otherwise, the buckthorn that is around continues to grow. There's one kind of oddball out there that's a little over a foot in the measurements that I have on here. They want us to look at the tallest one, so it's a bit skewed. I would say average-wise between all of the buckthorn, most of them are like in the 6-inch height range. But this data table, they have us apply the tallest, so that's why some of the numbers look really big because we're just picking on the one tall buckthorn plant for that. Just a few photos. I don't have all of them in here. The first one on the left, square one, that when we first initially started, that square was probably half bare ground. And that's filling in. You can't see it at this point in the year, but there is some garlic mustard in there, although I would say the garlic mustard was less this year than last year. Last year it was very dense and thick, but it is still there. Square 2, that one is one of the ones we did not seed because we only have some of the plots seeded with the native seed mix, so there's less vegetation in there. Square 3, again, that one's on the left. That is seeded with the native seed mix. In square 4 on the right is not. Square 3, again, has some pretty dense broadleafs in there. Square 5 and 6 gives you a picture of all of them. You can see even square 6, which is probably has the least amount of vegetation, it still has quite a bit in there. These are, just in case you were curious to see what the fisheye photos look like, these are just a few examples. There's a whole bunch of them we take. I just put 3 of them in here, but they're looking up so they can go in. They have software. They can estimate the amount of light reaching that. Couple other pictures. This one here is one of the more sparsely vegetated. You see the white flags. The white flags is our marker for the buckthorn. So that's the test buckthorn that we're measuring. That is around those white flags. If you look closely, I think I have, here's another close-up. You can see in the photo on the left a little bit of buckthorn in there. And then the photo on the right is just showing some of the grasses. Those were in one of the plots that we actually seeded for that. Couple other things, I won't go through all these, but this is from my survey, is the list of the species that I have identified on site, some of which are in the seed mix, and some of these are not in there. If you want to take a closer look at that, let me know. I can get you the presentation or I can get you information. One second to the last thing, this is the same tables I had earlier, but this is since the start of the project. So the bare ground leaf litter has decreased in all of the squares except for square 2. Sedges in grass have decreased for some reason in squares 4 and 6, but those do not have any of our native seed mix. Ferns and conifers have had no change, and then broadleafs have increased in density in all the squares with the exception of square 5. Any questions?
This is can you remind us which year of the current cycle?
So this is the first year of the newer cycle, I guess I'll call it, because they got funding. It should have ended last year. So this is the first year of that. Next year we'll continue on. I think there's some uncertainty I know it will go through next year for sure. And next year we are going to do, as part of the grant they're doing, we're going to be going through more thoroughly in inventorying other plants that are in the understory of that plot. So,
Do have a question. Any relationship between the shading on the plots and having any kind of an impact, positive or negative, on the number of buckthorn in the plots?
yes.
I know it's a small sample. but-
Yeah, well, I can speak on two things. One, just looking at our site, yes, there is. So I would say the more shaded, and the more vegetation there is shading it out earlier, I can't even necessarily say less buckthorn, but the less the buckthorn is growing. And ones that are receiving more light, I'm seeing more buckthorn growth. I can say, based off of data that's been released as part of this, the initial one before it went out to plots across the state, they have seen that as well, and they have also seen that the seed mix with the grasses, if they get into areas with more light, the grasses are taking off and really shading out anything else in those plots.
Which species of grasses?
Oh, I'd have to look. Hold on a second. I might have that with me. Let's see if I have the whole. So, yes, all right. There is some little blue stem, big blue stem, and some of the other ones I'd have to look up for sure on exactly what they are, because this does not have all the details in it like I thought it did. But I know there's little blue stem, big blue stem in there, and I think they also added in 3-4 different grass seed mixes that they had not done in the original one as well.
Are those blue stems something that was in your seeding mix, or are they volunteers?
They were in the seeding mix.
Okay.
Yep. So from when I set this up, there was very little grass in any of the plots. There were other broadleaf, but very little grass. So, yep. And I see the trend I see is the squares I have seeded. If I find grass, it's in the ones I've seeded, and the ones I haven't seeded, pretty much nothing, other than every once in a while you'll see something. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Jody, how many of these plots are across the state? Do you remember?
There was originally, I think, 76 of them, 78 of them. And I don't know how many continued on. And I might be able to get that information to see, but yeah, yep. So, and there is, I can dig it up and get it to you or bring it next time if you want, because they have started to release papers about their initial Cover It Up. You might even be able just to find some of them out there, because it's starting to get out there more, and they're starting to do presentations about it. So,
You mentioned that one of the plots had not much, there was more bare ground in one. Do you have a reason that might be the case?
I'm guessing maybe a bit more shade. The one that right now still has more bare ground is kind of almost exactly like it was when I originally set it up. So, and it's not one that's seeded, so it hasn't had any influence from any of our seed mix at all at this time, so.
And the location of those is on the bike trail
Yep.
or near it?
Yeah, it's off of the bike trail, 7th South, kind of between the bike trail and Ridgeway in there, so, yep. And there are Names Rocket, I found a Tritarian honeysuckle not that far from there. So I actually have a whole list The summer before it got hot, I went out, and so I actually have a whole list of invasives I found along the bike trail too. So, yep.
Thank you. Thank you. On our agenda item 5.8, the utility billing informational insert, and then there's a standing question plans for future inserts. We completed the August one.
It was way too much fun.
Okay. Did you save anything for the next go-around?
Yeah, I'm not going to do the next
Oh.
one.
Our next standard one in the spring is to do the.
April, yeah.
So, yeah, is to do the big tree contest, so that one's a little bit easier. But keep it in mind if you run into one, and maybe it's information towards the grant results. That might be usable.
Well, a suggestion might be is, where are we on Emerald Ash Borer? And, what the news is on the grant, did we get it or not, would be germane in the spring, probably.
Paul?
I came across pruning young trees, and I sent it out to everybody
Yep.
and I thought it might be useful to highlight that to the new tree growers.
Yeah.
So we could maybe add that, besides just learning how to cut off a limb, learn which limb to take off. Might be useful.
Yep. Noted for next time. To that, 5.9, the big tree contest. Deadlines for submissions is this upcoming Monday. We've got 7 submissions.
What, on the deadline, what time of the day is the deadline? Is it 8 in the morning or in the afternoon, or is just,
But if we look at the end of the day,
I didn't hear that, Denise, I'm sorry.
I would say until business closes at the rec center, so 9 o'clock at night if they wanted to drop it off.
'Cause I would be available on the 11th or the 13th to help measuring trees if anybody else wants to.
I'll take that as a volunteer.
Yeah,
And
it's
Paul's
kind of
checking
fun.
his calendar. He's going to go 9:13 and
I'm not
join
going to
you.
write a,
He's going to join you.
see what my calendar says. Might add.
if we want to,
13th I would be available,
Pardon me?
yes.
Sold.
which
I
day?
would, 13th of September.
Okay, what time?
What time
All
do you
day.
want to go?
Pardon me?
What time do you want to go? I'm available.
Okay, how about 9 in the morning?
That might be a little early. I could make it.
You got to be done by the time the rec center closes that
I
night
move
at
slow,
9.
but I could get there by 9.
Okay.
Well, we could meet at the rec center and then we pick
9
up the.
o'clock, okay.
Yeah.
9 a.m. at the rec center. On the 13th, which
On the
is
13th.
Wednesday.
Then we won't have anybody come in and say, wait a minute,
I am available. You can call me if you need to break a tie.
pardon me?
I'm available. You can call me if you need to break a tie, if you two
Well,
can't
If
decide.
you want to come
You can
along,
come
there's 3 of us can look at 7 trees.
All right.
More the merrier.
And we'll have that info or that decision made and ready for our November meeting then. That should work. Then to the 5.10, invasive species management on city administered lands. We looked at this within the work session. And Joey, you want to give us a little more?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As indicated, this plan was presented at the work session in August. Wanted to bring that back to a meeting as one of our invasive species management working plans that we have in place right now. This plan is in we work together with the Park and Rec staff and Streets Department, Mr. Huffman, on how we control these areas. And as I indicated at the work session, that this is a working plan, so it's ever changing as we identify areas. And really, we have different levels of service in different areas. You know, some of our parks, we are mowing 2 times a week. Some areas, it's twice a summer. And it also depends on conditions of weather and a variety of variables, equipment, and all of those factors. And as I indicated, in those areas that maybe see mowing 2 times a year or 1 time a year, we are still reactive when we're hearing of or identifying, you know, invasive species in areas or an issue that someone has or a concern. We are reactive to those and need feedback in those areas if people identify that. So I'd be happy to, either myself or Mr. Huffman, identify any questions that you guys have on this, or as you've had now almost a month to review this plan. This was put together by our facility maintenance supervisor, Ryan Wire, and is something that we work throughout the year.
I have several questions and comments on the, Joey was kind enough to give me a copy of the stormwater control pond mowing program. But in the city code, there's part of an ordinance that deals with that, and it's probably the most convoluted thing I've ever seen in the city code. So I'm not a lawyer, and I think the person that probably wrote that piece of the city code wasn't a lawyer either, because it's very, very difficult for me to understand. So I've heard six inches or less for vegetation in the city, and looking at the city code, it doesn't discriminate between, you know, private land or municipal owned land or state land or federal land. It just says six inches on property. So what does that apply to? That's my first question.
To answer your question, we go off a weed notice. When we get a complaint on an area, we go out and check it. Yeah, if it's a homeowner or a property owner, like there's some vacant lots or anything, if it's over 6 inches and there's a complaint and there's weeds in there, we send out a weed notice to that property owner.
Okay, but that 6-inch height would apply to city-owned land as well as private property.
Correct.
Okay. So does this proposal, how does that fit in with that 6 inches?
You know, that's a great question. So it comes down to conditions. Staffing is a big part of this as well. So I can't confidently sit up here and say at all times throughout the year, the growing months, that all of these areas are under 6 inches.
Well, I'm just thinking out loud here is that, you know, there's a lot of places in the city where there's a lot of vegetation that's got his height more than 6 inches. But that probably needs to be addressed somehow in the city code, because right now it says 6 inches, and it doesn't say different classes of property, just property. And the concern I have with the mowing is that when we were looking in these invasive species issues, is that places that are mowed are probably places that will keep noxious vegetation and invasive species somewhat in check if it's mowed. And my concern is that in what I would call a delayed mowing program, is that if it's going to be enough or frequent enough to keep invasive species or noxious species under control. And then I had one question. There's the use of the term of of natural vegetation. And, you know, if you look at that Jordy just talked with, there's not a whole lot of what I would consider to be natural vegetation in wildlands, if we want to call them that, in New Ulm. Most of it is non-native species and invasive species, and in some cases noxious species. So, you know, calling it natural is it's like calling my yard natural just because it's green, you know, but it's not natural. But whether it's introduced or naturalized, you know, which most of this stuff is right now. But that was a couple of the concerns that I had on that, and the proposal to hay it periodically seems like a good compromise to me. But it's just the timing of that, because if the vegetation is tall and dead in the spring and the fall, it becomes a wildfire hazard. And then people who live next to parks where, like me, where this is a proposal that will affect it, I would not next to a, you know, there's been a lot of where it might produce a wildfire danger, you know, just that for the timing of the mower. But those are my concerns about it. And I have a vested interest. So.
Those are great points, Commissioner Romaine. One part of that too that I just wanted to add in, and we discussed a little bit at the work session, is even these areas that are mowed and hayed, we have identified some areas in there in the past, for instance, that have either thistle or another invasive species that have been also sprayed. Those that we can treat. So even though it's not a frequent mowing process, there are still some areas that we are treating as we can. And a lot of times that does come from public input, or our crews out there, you know, seeing that too. But some of these areas we're not seeing as much. So if public has input, we'd love to hear it.
Anything else for Joey on that plan or that program? The flexibility in there is something that he stressed, because like the last 3 years, we've had some dry years, and that's changed conditions. They've had to react a little bit more to some of those weedy spots that normally weren't weedy spots, because they were getting mowed more frequently. Mm-hmm. So. That was connected to the invasive species management proposal, and we've discussed that a couple times, where that program takes that into account. So if there's no other questions, we'll go to, no other questions?
I don't have any at this time.
We'll go to our new business, the 6.1, a draft of a prescribed grazing ordinance. Joe, if you want to describe that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. We touched briefly on this during the work session, but here's presenting to you today is the draft ordinance that staff is intending to move forward with. We are waiting on a couple clarifications from the city attorney on some of these things, but in short, this proposed ordinance would allow for the use of goats for grazing for invasive species control. Within the proposed language, you can see it really applies to a parcel that's half an acre in size. It can be combined with other neighboring parcels. So we are really focusing this on some of our wooded hillsides within the city. A lot of this language was taken from other municipalities that have similar ordinance. And we have been working with a semi-local vendor or goat contractor who does this work in the surrounding area as well. So, so that's what we had to present today. I guess if there's a specific section you have questions on, we can try to answer those questions for you today. I think otherwise, we are looking for commission support of this ordinance that we can take back to the city council if you chose to do so.
Any questions, commissioners?
Just my opinion is that goats are great. You know, they can munch up all the vegetation in the understory, but if you don't do anything to, you know, it'd be very similar to what Jordy has found out is that, you know, you can clear out the buckthorn and you can clear out the noxious species, but if you don't modify the conditions, it's just going to come back to buckthorn and other noxious species. So it's part of the solution, but it's not the solution. And as I look at this, you know, in a past life, I dealt with liability insurance for government leases and that sort of thing. So, but you know, having a $1 million per occurrence and a $2 million general aggregate is probably going to reduce the demand for permits to
That's
have grazing, because
that's kind of what's turning into the standard for doing business with the municipality. So that's what vendors are required to cover or have coverage for. But that, again,
I don't know.
that section's highlighted because
I thought that definition of habitual bleeding was pretty good.
the insurance is.
Is there a demand for this, or?
There is, yep.
Oh.
Yeah, we've been asked by residents who want to pursue this, actually a neighborhood that wants to pursue this that's on the hillside. So that's the driving factor behind it. And then we've talked to staff too, and there's areas where.
Grazing
we can use it.
animals on steep slopes is just, to me, is an erosion hazard as well, depending upon how the grazing is managed.
Sure. Like as the vendor that inquired, that he was contacted by residents in town, he's been doing it quite a while, and he's got the same vendor that was out in the state park, so.
Well, I think it's great. They clean out a lot of invasive species and stuff we don't want. The only problem is goats aren't selective on what they eat, you know, so
Yep.
there's little young oak trees or
It's hard
other
to
trees.
educate the goats as to what should be eaten and
Yeah,
what should be left alone.
That's the hard part. So, I mean, it's good for cleaning out stuff, but like I said, yeah, I've got goats. I've had them for 20 years already, and yeah, they're not selective on what they eat, so.
Well, you know, I have experience with goats a long time ago in controlling prickly ash in woodlands, but that was tied into something we were working with when seeds falls of the desirable species, and then once that was reestablished, the goats went away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the actually were eaten, but
Yeah.
not by me, but by the landowner. So, but that was, you know, that change. You know, the goats were, if you will, were the site prep people, and then it was taking advantage of seed fall in the fall, and then take the goats out.
Sure, sounds good. So if we have goats, maybe we could get some sheep in the holding ponds areas and keep down the grass.
Yeah, as of right now, it's specifically worded for goats, so that would take another amendment to the ordinance.
I'm done. Thank you.
See sheep in the list. on this, and now I'm looking for them again, but
Yeah, the sheep are permitted right now in the industrial, for certain industrial properties within the city. So that was done for Southside Auto Salvage. That was, 10 to 15 years ago when that ordinance was changed to allow that.
any other questions? Noting the caution or the valid questions, I see no problem with it. An encouragement that you're going to have to take them back in there, or you're going to want to put something's going to grow there. So it'd be good to have a plan or a follow-up, because it'll be clear for a few years. And I think we see that in the state park as well. That it does have that effect, but
So,
Joe, did you need anything else from us other than,
I guess if we could, if the commission chooses to do so, we could use a motion of support that we can include when we take this to council. It's commission's choice what you want to do.
I look to you guys for support?
I'm not going to make a motion on this.
Okay.
Don't have much to say on that. Raised cattle in pastures, so I know what they look like. Raised areas changes the vegetation component for a while.
I think most of these hillsides have had some grazing at some point
Oh, yeah.
in the past, and I
Indeed.
don't think it's going to drastically alter it any more than it has been.
Why not? I did see there's two grazing periods per year. Two grazing periods per year are allowed according to the write-up
Okay.
in the permit. I didn't notice that previous. So, of 30 days each.
Okay. I think we're silent on it.
And that's completely fine, Mr. Chair. So.
I do appreciate how clean they make things, and they're far more efficient than I am, but I've also seen them walk down trees, and I mean that's the challenge with them, and that's why when they've managed them, they're fenced in and they're limited days. So, any other new business from? Again, thank you to our guests, Jordy and Tony. Our date of our next meeting, last meeting of 2023, will be November 2nd. And a reminder to have any agenda items in ahead of that time. With no further business, declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you for being here.
We will.
It's been for you this year.
I guess I could use some rain.
Yeah, I know. I know, right?
Oh, yeah, so you didn't all settle